everybody is having a fantastic day on this particular Monday afternoon, and all along those lines, it's another edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. And of course, we've got amazing guests as always. And of course, I hope everybody is enjoying the weather. I know it was a little bit stormy on yesterday here in Durham, North Carolina, but we are definitely going to deal with the hot weather that comes in August. And I think they said July was one of the hottest months ever recorded ever. So that is something else that is going on in the world as well. And of course, a lot of people are very sad, myself included, at the U.S. World Cup team taking that loss. And I definitely actually woke up early in the morning to find out that they had gone to a draw and then penalty shots and then lost by a literal, like just a fraction of a little bit to where the ball went in the goal, and they lost by that little bit and all in that second. Matter of fact, I think I even posted something on my Facebook saying how much can occur in that little fraction of a second or fraction of a time, because I think they were saying it could have been like a millisecond or millimeter or something along that kind of space, but it was definitely very fractional. And I was thinking that, you might miss your dream date by that much of a time fraction, or you might miss getting that bid in if you're in the financial lanes by that fraction of a second, or you might miss a number of other things by a fraction of a second. So when I bring in Chris, I'm going to find out if he's ever lost or won anything by that kind of a fraction of a second and along those lines, because definitely it was heartbreaking to see. I think that definitely there's some other teams that have advanced and continue to advance. So we'll see who is crowned the women's champion in that World Cup series, because I think that by the weekend we should be down to like around the final four or something along that lines in the women's World Cup. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to what's going on in politics, whether it is the kind of courtroom cases that are going on surrounding Trump, or whether it is some of the things that are going on around Hunter Biden and others, or whether it's just trying to figure out who are going to be the candidates. I know some people are frustrated that it might be two folks in their elderly years that are going to be the presidential candidates, because it does look like we are heading to a rematch between Trump and Biden unless something drastically changes in the polls. And of course, things can change. Revelations can come out there and other things can happen that can change the course of action. But right now, that looks like what we are heading to, and all in that space. But definitely a lot of things are going on in that kind of part of the world. And of course, as I mentioned on another show, it was good to see a celebrity in the news for good news and not necessarily the bad news that we sometimes hear all too often and all along those lines. Because as I was mentioning, I saw that Taylor Swift had given a significant raise. I'm talking like, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to some of the people that were involved in her various concerts. And of course, she's made a whole heap of money doing that. So it was good to see that she was giving the drivers, the grips, and a number of others some of the return on that investment. So definitely a lot of folks are buying those tickets. Those tickets are not cheap. As we know, a lot of performances tickets are never cheap, but it was good to see that she is returning the kindness and actually giving some of the money to the folks that have helped her be the success that she is. So it's always good when you get that kind of things going on in the news, as opposed to some of the other things that we hear in the news that isn't as positive and all along those lines. So I'm going to bring my guest in for today and see what his thoughts are and how the weather is treating him. Like I said, it's hot as all get out here in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm trying to remember where Chris is and if it's as hot there as it is here, because we've been dealing with this hot weather. And I'm going like, hey, when is September coming around? Because I do know that here we have a lot of good festivals. Centerfest is held in September. I want to say that Hopscotch is held around that time as well. So definitely, hopefully by September, we've cooled down and folks can enjoy the fine outside weather as they are going to the outside festival. I know that I participate in a festival in July. I've been doing that for decades now, and it is never, oh, well, I shouldn't say never, because there has been an exception to the rule here and there, but usually it is very hot in that July 4th type weekend when the Festival is going on. And I become very good friends with the drink companies, as well as the watermelon that they serve and other things that they do to keep us refreshed, including providing a real nice artist hospitality area, and as I am an MC, I get to enjoy in that as well. So, Chris, how are you doing? Tell the folks a little bit about yourself and whether you've ever lost anything by that fraction of a second that apparently our women's team lost.
Yeah, well, great to be here. My name is Chris Hood. I'm a digital strategist, an author, a podcast host, just like you. And I am currently in Southern California, where today it's going to reach a high of 86. So, not as crazy as it is down in the South right now, and definitely no humidity here. So, 86 I can deal with. But I was just driving across the country a couple of weeks ago, and I was hitting 113-degree weather.
Mhm.
And then I was in Dallas last week where it was in the high 90s, almost 101, and walking around the streets of Dallas for a conference. So definitely hot weather across the country, and I'm in a nice, cool area right now, so I'm pretty content.
Sounds
Um,
like it. What got you to come to California? Because I know some of my friends have lived out there, and I've met some new friends, including some from the podcasting world, as well as some that are here on Pod TV that are in various parts of California. So, are you a California born and bred, or are you one of those folks like some of my friends, including some friends in the film industry, that transplanted to California?
Yeah, I moved here when I was in high school. So I grew up on the East Coast, moved around a little bit with my family in states like Ohio and New York for a little while, Indiana, but then moved to California in high school and pretty much stayed in this area ever since. I did move to Virginia for a little bit of time for a company that was very exciting at the time, and then moved back to California. So yeah, I've been here for quite a while, but I've been the type that I'm more than willing to move around and look for new opportunities. So there's nothing really preventing me from moving other than I don't want to sit in 100 degrees with 100% humidity and constant thunderstorms on a regular basis. So like I said, 86 is feeling very nice right now.
Yeah, it sounds like it's feeling very nice and all along those lines and everything in that space. I mentioned that fraction of a portion that apparently the US lost by. And like I said millisecond, it was actually a millimeter and all along those lines. But I had posted in my Facebook how many times we might miss the basics of necessity. Who knows? You might just miss getting that bread by a millimeter because somebody got there a millimeter ahead of you, and all in that space if you're trying to get that last loaf of bread in your house and everything. But a millimeter, it seems like a cruel way to go, but all in that kind of space. And I was just wondering in your own life if there was anything that you missed by a millimeter. I had jokingly put it on Facebook that you never know. You might miss that dream spouse of yours by a millimeter or along those lines because they might have left a millimeter before you did and all in
Yeah.
that space. But I was just wondering if there's anything that you are aware of that you missed by that fraction of a portion.
Oh, well, sure. I think we all have. We may not remember them, or like you said, we may not even realize it. If it's fate, it could have happened in that fraction, or, any number of things could happen in those segments of time. I've been in the video game industry for quite a long time, and part of the video game mentality is last minute wins, right?
Mhm.
Or it's no different than the soccer example. Like I've been in games online with friends and playing and killing the dragon with one person standing still and uh you know no health left and no potions left to survive. Like, so there have been some fabulous stories, for those of you who are familiar with the video game industry, where you can relate that. But I would argue on the flip side, when we deal with fractions of time, I think time is such one of these arbitrary, we understand what time is, but you could lose opportunities in what we call fractions of time that play out over the course of decades. Think about just like the dot com industry, right?
Right.
building websites. I'm sure there's lots of people out there who were maybe presented with, hey, here's an opportunity, but we just brushed it off like that's not going to be a thing. And then all of a sudden it is a thing. And we reflect back like 20 years ago, I had the chance to, buy a stock, or I had a chance to do this, but we don't realize that missed opportunity in that moment until we see that technology evolution over the course of, again, 10, 20 years.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's something that we talk about quite often on this show, as well as some of my other shows that I am part of as well. But it's that inner critic and that outer critic and all along those lines. And I know that there have been a number of jobs. I've been involved in the event planning space and the cultural art space for many years, probably multiple decades again in that space as well. And I do know that there have been leadership jobs even in that space. And a lot of times we have that constant conversation with ourselves, all the reasons that we should or shouldn't go for that job. And sometimes by the time you finally talk yourself into going for the job and you inquire about the job has long gone. Because I know that has happened to me at least twice that I am aware of, where I could have been in a greater leadership position within some of these artistic groups that I am part of. But like I said, I was having that constant conversation as, do I have the right degree, or something is missing from the requirements that they asked for that I have not done. Now, I've probably done it in other sense, in the sense of the experiences have led up to whatever they were asking for from an academic standpoint. But, you have that whole inner conversation, and then you defeat yourself. So as a business leader, and as one that talks to a lot of business leaders, is that something that you have faced, and how do you get people out of that mindset? Because I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation and probably how many jobs I've lost.
Oh yeah, totally. I as you were talking, I was reflecting on when I was younger, like high school into college. I was approached by somebody to do a graphic design type of job. That's how it was presented to me. And it was for a film or a set of TV shows. And so I went up to Hollywood. I went through the interview process, and then they sat down and they said, let us show you some of the things that we're working on. And they proceeded to present to me the graphic design. Again, that's what it was called, but really it was graphic special effects for the Power Rangers, the television show, the Power Rangers. And this was, again, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was so intimidated by the thought of trying to produce special effects for a television show. I basically never called them back. And then you look back and you think, like, if I would have done that and just learned how to do it at that time and built that skill, and then from there, we look at where 3D and special effects have grown to today, and even brands like the Power Rangers. I could have had a completely different trajectory of my entire professional career if I would have just said yes. But the fear that is often in us to talk us out of it, or say no, or not go through with any type of opportunity, is really our biggest hindrance, right? And
No,
I think a lot of people need to take a step back just in those moments and say, I realize I might not be able to do this. I realize that I'm fearful of this. I realize that there are some challenges with this. All of the negative things that we think about in our heads, like, this is not something I can accomplish. Wipe those away just for the moment and then say, but what if? What if I could do it? What if I could learn it? What if I can make it happen? What if I can drive the distance? What if I can go on that journey? And those are the things we often don't ask ourselves. And if we can just shift that mindset between all of the reasons why we can't and all of the reasons why, well, what if? I think we would make probably some smarter decisions.
No, I definitely agree with that. As he was going through that conversation, I was going like, wait a minute. He had the opportunity to be part of an iconic brand, because there are people that even to this day know who the Power Rangers are, and there are people that even have their particular favorite color Power Ranger that they are into and along those lines, and even to the video game space. I think that there are several video games that are out there that are based on the Power Ranger legacy and all in that space. So I'm going like, yep, he could have probably been making, not that you're not doing well as it is, but you probably could have been in the Billionaires Club if you had been actually jumping in that in the high school level and all in that space. But you opted not to, and you opted to go into something totally different. And part of what you've gone into is this whole notion of social media strategy and all along those lines. And I do know that that has become a big issue. And there's a couple of questions that I had around that that I am fascinated by, because I know a lot of people get into the whole algorithm conversation and they are convinced that their social media is better than others' social media. And I know that I oftentimes get asked, how far does Pod TV go? And we sometimes will turn to our social media outlets. As a matter of fact, I was asked that earlier today. And I know that I have like 20 plus thousand followers on LinkedIn. I know that Nick's got a similar amount, and there are other people that have similar amounts. So I can do some quick math and say that there are at least 75,000 to 100,000 people that will at least know of what we're doing. Now, whether they're actually going to stay there the whole time or another, that is where I sometimes get frustrated, because there has not been developed to my satisfaction yet, even though I know that Vimeo and others are trying their hand at it, enough of a notion of like a Nielsen's rating for social media, unless you're a Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan knows that he's getting millions and everything. I can guesstimate that I am impacting 100,000 people or something along those lines based on our aggregate social medias that me and some of the founders have, because I'm a part of the cog of the machine, but not necessarily a founder. But what is your thoughts, and what got you into social media? And am I thinking correctly in that sense of like maybe doing some aggregate numbers in the sense of being able to tell people that, hey, because I know for a fact, because Nick teases me, there was a gentleman named George Copen, and he would say that I don't know what Pod TV is doing, but I know I can't see enough of Mark Lee. He's really getting on my nerves. And what Nick did, and then turned around and invited him to our monthly meeting that we had. And we definitely came up with a meeting of minds that I was not trying to deliberately aggravate them by having all my various shows pop in on my LinkedIn feed. But from the network standpoint, they're like, hey, more people that are looking and at least seeing it for a minute, they're at least getting some content, and who knows, maybe even some merit from what is being taught and educated on in that space. But what are some of your thoughts as a digital media strategist?
Yep. Yeah, I spend a little time in social media space, but most of my time just at a broader scale is in digital strategy
Right.
and in customer centric approaches for organizations. But we can understand that social media is driven by content. That's really what it is. Whether it's content you're producing or content you're watching, the whole concept of the internet is really built around producing content.
Mm-hmm.
And then is it successful is based on the data.
Right.
And there's data everywhere. There's data on the platform that we're on right now. There's data on other podcast platforms. There's data on YouTube, the analytics of the activities that are your consumers are engaged with. The data's out there. It's, can you get the data and can you analyze the data in a way that's going to be beneficial to you? And that data is essential, not just for content, not just for podcasting or social media, but for businesses in general.
Right.
So if you are a business and you are producing content like a podcast in order to drive traffic to your business and then convert that traffic into sales, that entire funnel system and analytics is all driven by data that you have to understand and look at, right? So if we think about, again, your podcast and whether it's successful, all of that is going to be built then on the relevancy of the content.
Right.
So you could produce 1,000 different podcast episodes, but if it isn't resonating with somebody, if somebody's not interested in it, they're not going to return. They're not going to watch it. You mentioned Rogan. Well, why is he one of the most successful podcasters out there? Well, because he's building content that people want to listen to. He has guests on that people are interested in, and he has built a following of people who want to continue hearing the same content.
Right.
Right? The principle of it is not challenging. The execution of it is definitely challenging, right?
And that's
Because you
what
have to do it consistently.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. That consistency, because definitely we've been consistently Pod TV on for 3 years, and I am friends with Brian Showman, who is the Voice Your Vibe guy out in California, and does a number of other things, including his What's Good Wednesday and Shout Out Saturdays, and all into that space that kind of brings the kid element to adult conversation, because he definitely has some adult conversations, but he's also asking your favorite cereal and doing some dancing and a number of other things. As a matter of fact, I was a participant, as was some others, in the whole LinkedIn competition that he did for, lip sync competition that he did for a while as well, and all in that space. But I guess the frustration I have, and I don't know your thoughts about this, is that, when we think about the Nielsen's, one, I never knew a Nielsen family, even though I'm sure there were Nielsen families out there, and maybe I knew them, but they just never revealed that they were Nielsen families. But when there are so many different outlets in the digital marketing space, and it might be even a conversation you have with the business leaders that you talk to, is what are some of the ways that you suggested they consolidate that information? Because like you said, there are a lot of different sources that you can get, whether it's your YouTube analytics, your Facebook analytics, and a number of other analytics. And I know that there are some tools that will try to assimilate and put that information together and give you a more detailed, concrete report that gives you a more solid look at your entire analytics. But I haven't seen one that I have felt was all the way satisfactory. But maybe there's one that I am missing in that lane, because that's where I get frustrated when you have the Nielsen's and the Arbitrons. They seem to do a very good job with TV and radio, respectively. I don't know that we have that necessarily, except for the big guys in podcasting. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, there's a couple of brands or sites that are working on doing that. The challenge in the podcasting market is that usually you have, like you said, multiple different sources.
Right.
And your podcast hosting service, whoever you're hosting the podcast with, has analytics in it.
Right.
If you have a web page with landing, then that's typically with Google. And then all of the platforms. So like Apple has their own podcast for whatever is being listened to on Apple. Spotify has their own analytics for whoever's listening on Spotify. And if you're across all of those different platforms, then you've got to go through and add those up. Right. But there are some, there's like a company called Chartable. You can go and access that and embed that into your feed, and it's going to track across all of those different platforms that you syndicate out to. But the argument is does it make sense to have one source for everything, or is it better to actually have multiple different views of your data? I would argue that having different views of your data is a good thing, because you might find inconsistencies or information that you weren't aware of. For example, I had a podcast once, and it came back and it said, I was the #1 podcast in Sweden. Like, well, where did that come from? Like, I didn't even know people in Sweden were listening to me. So as you go and you learn that, you can dive into it more, and you can leverage the different sources of data to better understand, why am I appearing as the #1 podcast in Sweden, right? So just because you can't aggregate it all, the goal here is to have the data, have access to the data, and be able to interpret it through those different sources. But yeah, I agree. I would argue also that you use Nielsen as an example. Nielsen hasn't quite gotten it completely correct either. Right. They are across multiple different types of entities, and they are only assuming based on the trends that they're seeing. So you could say, 1 million homes are watching this TV show. Well, they might actually only have 10,000 homes. And then they can extrapolate from that the data that makes them believe that 1 million homes are watching it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that as being the case where they may be just doing it in that space and along those lines. But when it comes to digital strategies, even for businesses, what do you think are some of the trends that we should be looking at and some of the things that we can expect? Because I know a lot of people are getting very excited, and I've had friends in that lane around AI. There are some people that are concerned around AI as well because they feel it doesn't have the human element and doesn't always know the nuances the way that we would like. And of course, there are people, even coming back to where you were at in California with the Hollywood strike, that are afraid that it might be getting rid of jobs, including some jobs that we've been used to being done by humans, including the restaurant workers and the mailman and a number of other ones. Not sure that I'm ready for a drone to deliver my mail, but that's just me personally and everything. But what are some of the trends that you are seeing, and is technology going to be one of those trends?
Yeah, well, technology in general is what our world is built on now. And that's the fact. And you've got to be able to understand that technology and keep up with the technology for as fast as it's changing. So you talk about AI, and I'm going to throw in another example of technology to counter this, to give you an example of this, which is 3D.
Hmm.
If you've ever been to a 3D movie, and even if you go all the way back to like the 50s and you had the little glasses, the red
Right.
and the blue on both sides, or today more modern, you got more sunglass types of 3D. Well, 3D has been around actually since the 1900s,
Oh, wow.
and it evolved over the course of the time. It built up in popularity in the 50s, then it kind of went away. And then over the course of the 1990s into the 2000s, and then specifically with movies like Avatar and all of the um, Marvel and superhero movies, we saw a resurgence of 3D. But the premise, the technology of 3D has been around for over 100 years, almost 200 years.
Right.
AI has been around since the 1950s. And since the 1960s, you started to actually see AI being implemented. And then in the 80s, we got a big push for AI, again, specifically in video games,
Hmm.
which is really where it began to mature. And then we also started to see even things like virtual reality and AI and virtual reality kind of converging for realistic simulations, like flight simulations for training pilots. And then over again the course of the 2000s, we saw an increase and resurgence of AI. And then, of course, we got today, which it's become a huge fad. The reality is AI has been around for a long time. The technology has improved the access to the AI. And that access, which you and I and pretty much everybody else can actually engage with a form of AI more seamlessly, is what everybody's talking about. But what's really interesting in this is that the perception of what AI can do and where we are actually at with AI today is at least 10 years off. Like, we believe that AI is capable of all of these incredible and crazy and scary things, but in reality, we're not really there yet. We've got an AI that can automate certain aspects. It is definitely powerful. It's definitely fun to play with. It's amazing at times, but I don't think we fully understand exactly what AI is. And you mentioned the humanity element of it. There's definitely a lack of humanity in it. It's really just replicating what we tell it to replicate. And
Right.
it's automating it is really the best functionality of it. Even when you ask a question, like, tell me how to do whatever, all it's really doing is it's expediting and automating your Google searches,
Right.
and it's going out there and finding the same information. So imagine if I said, hey, tell me what digital marketing strategies are. Well, you could go to Google, type in digital marketing strategies, get a list of websites, click on a website, go read the information out of that website, process it in your information in your head, and understand what digital marketing strategies are. Or I can go to Chat GPT, ask it, tell me what digital marketing strategies are, and it's going to go and give you the exact same information. All
Yeah.
that's doing is expediting and automating. And so we have to still maintain an understanding of what AI is, what it can do, before we go crazy with all of these ideas that, again, is probably 10 years away still.
Yeah, I think it's easily 10 years away because one of the companies I work for when I'm not doing pod TV is a company called Measurement Incorporated, and it is the testing company that does a lot of the end of the year tests around high schools. And they have done some of the college things like MCAT and LSAT in the past, but I would argue it's pretty much the grade schools that is their bedrock, whether that is high school or whether that is elementary school and all along those lines. So it's the end of the year test. And while we have been mostly doing this pandemic period, doing it from home and remotely, we were oftentimes going against the computer, even in what was going on. And part of the reason that they still have human testers is because of what I just said, which is that the computer doesn't always understand the nuances or the cultural backgrounds and some of the backgrounds that the students are bringing into the test. And while the test may have, in some cases, some very concrete answers, like as far as we know, 2+2 will always be 4, but there are some other answers that are being asked of these students that require more of a nuanced kind of like thought that the AI may not be able to pick up, that a human would be able to pick up more quickly, which is why us humans still have a job in that sense and may not have as many that are doing it. And we are oftentimes tested against the AI, but I think that we as humans do good because of the nuanced elements that are not there all the time. So I think that that is a case in point where we're not as far along as you would think we would be, because some people would be like, they don't need to have humans doing the testing right now. They can get a computer to do it. But I don't know that it's effective as of yet because of those nuances that the computer doesn't quite understand. Even though I got friends in the industry that are telling me that it might be closer than 10 years, that they may be getting down the nuances within the 3 to 5 year period, if not sooner. But for my sake, I hope not.
Well, I think part of those nuances that you're talking about is also based in our comfortableness with it. So you're talking about testing, but what if I said you're going to have an AI perform your brain surgery? Would you be comfortable with that?
Not at
Or
all.
what if I said we're going to put an AI in front of a courtroom to act as the judge? And in this case, 51% you're guilty or 51% you are innocent, right? You've been accused for murder. There's an AI in front who's the judge, doesn't understand the nuances, is simply looking at the law as it is portrayed and written and interpreted. Are we comfortable enough to allow that AI to decide our fate? These are some of the more, robust questions when we think about nuance.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And those are some very nuanced questions that will definitely, probably, like you said, hopefully that's 15, 20, 30 years down the line, even though if you follow shows like Black Mirror, it might be closer because that's kind of what they are looking at, is kind of this competitive thing and all along those lines. You mentioned your background, and I definitely want to get to some of the other things, even with your book and everything, in video games. And I have a good friend of mine, Jatovi, who is in the video game industry. He is a esports person, and he oftentimes talks about how that industry is bigger than baseball. I think it's baseball, basketball, football, and hockey combined, and everything in terms of the amount of revenue that is done in that sport. So do you think that the general public is realizing how big of a industry video games and esports are? And do you think we are directing our kids into some of the opportunities that exist within esports? Because I know that there are some folks, including some folks that are probably about my nephew's age, and they'll turn 14 and 15 this month and everything, that have made a whole heap of money off of esports. And definitely, maybe I'll even try to talk my nephews into doing that as well, because I know there's some that are younger than that, maybe even 8 and 7, that are making a significant amount of money in that space. But do you think that we as a society are realizing how big a industry that is?
Yeah, it's a huge industry. I think in terms of people watching esports or video games for sports, the audience size worldwide is beating everybody. That is true. Financially, It's not quite there. I think like the NFL is probably still generating more money than really anything. But if you combine with the NBA and the Major League Baseball, you know, the money, in terms of advertising and the sports itself are drastically higher than esports. However, what we are seeing is that there is that shift that is starting to happen, and some of the big name sponsors and some of the amount of advertising and definitely the individuals who are competing. We're seeing cash prizes for certain tournaments in the millions, 5 million, 10 million to win a video game competition. So it's huge. And in terms of careers and where this is going, we do see trajectories where it is only going to grow and increase. And so whether it's in esports, like from a broadcaster perspective and calling the games, like there are the same types of jobs that you would see in traditional sports, broadcasting, production, on-field services, concessions, because they're selling out stadiums worldwide for these types of events. All of those are viable, as well as the actual talent participating in the games. So if you really are passionate about a specific game, go practice, learn it, become a professional in that sport. I think that's all valid. Also, I will just say, from a caveat perspective, both from the benefits of video games as well as the technology in video games, there are two opportunities. So you should not look at video games as something that you don't want your children to do. That is the wrong approach. Video games are stimulating creativity. They are stimulating communication skills. They are stimulating activities like hand-eye coordination. The mental process that are going into video games today far outweigh anything in the past. And that engagement cannot be underscored. And then from a technology perspective, we are looking at video game developers, so individuals who are familiar with programming. Those are being translated into every other industry today. So we talked about like healthcare as an example. You can go learn how to perform brain surgery by playing a video game. The virtual reality, if we look at the metaverse of the future, cryptocurrencies originated in video games, right? So video, VR, AR, 3D, cryptocurrencies, AI, all are rooted inside of video games. So why not go and learn that as a profession? Because even if you don't build video games directly, you can use those same skill sets in everything that we see over the course of the next decade or two.
Yeah, it makes sense. Chris, you said something earlier, and I definitely want to get to something else about business and everything, but you said something earlier that had really resonated with me, and I'd just love to hear some further elaboration about it. Because a lot of people, when they think of things like AI and they think of a lot of the developments that we have and everything, they think of them as having first come from the minds of science fiction and then having come more into the realist world of the 21st century. But you mentioned earlier that AI has been around since, I think you said, at least the 50s or something along those lines, and that some of these other things that we think of as being more modern works, that they have been around longer than we like to give them credit for. And I guess one of the questions I've got is, why do you think that is? Because a lot of people will think that AI is something more modern, that it came out of the minds of the writers of the Jetsons, much that they think that the flying car, which we haven't seen yet, but the electric car, which we do see now, came out of those writers' minds, and there is now a modern day convenience and all in that space. But as you said that earlier about AI having been around since the 40s or 50s, I was going like, I didn't know AI had been here that long and all in that space. But why do you think it had taken it so long to have the mass appeal, for lack of a better term?
I'm going to use your Jetsons. I'm looking up if I can get my keyboard to work, but I'm going to just do a quick search here. because I think the Jetsons were late 60s or early 70s. When did the Jetsons first premiere? 62.
Mhm.
So in 1962, the Jetsons premiered, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, how did they know about AI, robotics, right? That was in the Jetsons.
It was, yep, because I remember Rosie.
So we could argue that the mind, the creativity, is fueling these concepts. It's a chicken or the egg type of scenario here. What came first? Did the technology come first and then we created concepts around the technology? Or did somebody kind of come up with the idea and then we built technology to facilitate that idea? We see the same thing with Star Trek.
Mhm.
Star Trek, 60s, they invented the cell phone. I mean, the flip phone. You can see it in original Star Treks. They go, hello, Captain. Um, well, fast forward from the 60s to the late 80s, early 90s, we had flip phones,
Mhm.
but they were designed theoretically, conceptually in Star Trek. And Star Trek has invented a lot of technologies. We haven't quite gotten to the teleporter yet, but again, theoretically, you can go through literature all the way back into the 80s. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley's
Right.
talks about reanimating bodies and using uh, technology to stimulate parts of the body. Well, was that original idea or was that made up at the time? We're capable of doing that type of technology today. So I can't really say, which comes first. Is it the technology or the creativity? But I will say that our culture is rooted in ideas and philosophies, from comic books to novels to even music, and the way we engaged with that helped us to stimulate these ideas. And then the technology basically started to go along with it, and we began to realize our fantasies and our worlds, our creativity into reality. And I think as we've started to watch the progression, even like 3D, like, oh, it'd be great to see a superhero movie in 3D. Well, the concept was rooted in comic books.
Mhm.
How can we make that come alive? So we could go through probably an entire episode talking about where the foundation of creativity and ideas have come from, and how do we then build upon that with technology. But it's ultimately, I think, a combination of all of it.
No, I definitely agree with you. As you were just saying that, I was thinking to myself about the early Star Trek episodes. I'm talking about early Star Trek, and I do remember that there were what you just alluded to, the flip phone, cell phone, and everything. And I want to say that those cell phones also had the ability to be used as our phones are oftentimes being used as a not just a communication device, but a video device, if I am remembering the episodes off the top of my head. And I also think that there was they weren't called laptops, but they definitely transported with the computer coming down with them to wherever planet they were visiting. So that would be the equivalent of a laptop computer, because it was a portable computer that they were taking with them to investigate. And I do remember a couple of episodes in the early days of Star Trek and Star Wars that definitely covered that kind of thought. So you're right. A lot of this has been stuff that is in our future that we don't think about, that comes from the science fiction area. But there's something about leadership and business that I wanted to get to, because there is a notion that goes on in business regularly. I hear companies, whether they're in the nonprofits or the profit world, and like I stated, I come from a couple of different companies. One of the companies is a nonprofit in the African American cultural community and all in that space, that being the Hayti Heritage Center in Durham. And of course, I mentioned Measurement, which is a for-profit company, and all in that space. And both of them companies, to some degree, always talking about innovation and trying to be part of the cultures of innovation. And they say that they are going to do praise, but I don't know that they always do a good job of praise. So I know that that's part of what your book deals with, as well as part of what you as a leader deal with as well. So that is what I sometimes get frustrated by, is that I hear some companies that say that they want their workers to be at their best, and that they want them to bring their ideas to the forefront and to help the company grow by fine tuning, massaging those ideas, and all along those lines. But I don't always feel that the companies, whether it's a major corporation like a Microsoft or a minor nonprofit, that they always do a good job of actually building on that culture and actually encouraging their employees. And I'm guessing that that's part of what you deal with when you talk about the culture of praise. But I am not one to put words into the mouth of my guests. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to whether I'm onto something that companies need to be doing a better job of developing this culture of praise.
Yeah, it's a challenge because I think what you see in most organizations that, especially as the organization gets larger, they go about what's in front of them. They go about their daily business. We are here to make money, or we're here to work with our clients, or whatever the case might be. And you get into a routine, and that routine is often focused on, these are the things that are on my to-do list today. And we lose sight, we lose focus of being able to continually evolve the organization, innovation, or to continuously praise our employees or our staff with what is the primary focus of the business, which I have always argued is the customer. And so if you're focused solely on internal operations and internal processes and internal to-do lists and internal whatever it is that's in front of you for that day, then you're losing focus of what your primary business is about. And then the whole purpose of praising your culture, praising your employees, is to align your employees and their satisfaction in the same way that you would align your customer satisfaction. Think about any business. You spend a lot of time focused on customer satisfaction. Are you happy? Did you have a good experience? We survey them all the time. We ask questions about how they enjoyed their new products or how well we supported them. But no one is doing the same thing for your employees. Well, how was your day? Do you feel like you served your customers well today? Do you feel like you accomplished something? The same types of questions we ask our customers to verify satisfaction should be the exact same questions that we ask our employees to verify their satisfaction. And what often happens is we see people who have great ideas. Like, I have an idea, like, I think we can improve this process, or how about if we try this? And they get shoved aside. Like, that's not your job. Right. Don't focus on that. Your job is this thing here that you've got to focus on today. And that builds frustration, and it doesn't allow you to be innovative, again, to serve ultimately your customers. And so you have to be able to balance this and understand that continuous praise and continuous acknowledgement, in the same way that you would praise and acknowledge your customers, go hand in hand. And that innovation is about recognizing that everyone in your organization has a voice and has the opportunity to evolve the products and the services that are going to be delivered back to the customer.
And along those same lines, Chris, as you were speaking, so many questions popped into my mind, and I'll go into them one at a time and everything. But there is a notion in the business community, and it's one that I don't always feel is a good notion, but I understand where it is coming from. But how often have we heard a business person get an idea from somebody that is not necessarily in that field and everything? Because you can get great ideas from a janitor, you can get great ideas from a cook and a number of other places, but sometimes people will use this phrase, and I've heard it used in even among peers of each other, which is to stay in your lane. It's not a phrase that I am a big fan of, because I think that sometimes you can get great ideas by going outside of your lane and everything. Not saying that you have to do every job and be everybody for everything, but sometimes the ideas may come from some very unorthodox places. So I think that sometimes it is all right to go outside of your lane. But I was just wanted your thoughts, because I know that I have heard people in the various business worlds that have talked about this notion of stay in your lane. That's not really your concern. That we've got people that handle that. Maybe somebody's got a great idea for public relations or a social media outlet based on something that they heard their kids talking about, and they may bring that to the company. And then some companies, not saying all companies, but some companies will be like, you're not the PR person, so you don't need to be dealing with that. And they might have missed a great idea that the person might have learned through some of their own communications and through some of their own groups that they are part of, because we also are part of the different groups, whether that's our church groups or our social clubs or just our friend and family circles and everything. But it is a phrase that I've heard thrown out there quite often, and I think it is an overused phrase. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, Chris.
Sure. Stay in your lane is no different than you just missed a perfect opportunity in a millisecond of time.
Right.
The amount of time it takes you to say stay in your lane is the amount of time that you lost potentially $1 million idea.
Right.
There is no lanes. You can't have lanes, especially in today's world. But if we extracted this and looked more at a high level, go 20,000 feet here. One of the questions that I ask companies often is, where do you get inspiration for your company outside of your industry?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is critical because we were just talking about how video games can be leveraged across multiple industries. You can take the same principles of video games and apply it to healthcare, as an example. I'll often use Domino's Pizza as a great example of this. And I will share how Domino's Pizza is a very customer-centric company. They are revolutionizing how you order pizza. And if you've watched recently, they've got commercials now with a pinpoint, and you could order a pizza and have it delivered anywhere. Right. You bring up your map, you drop a pin, you could be on a park bench watching the sunset, and somebody will find you and deliver you a pizza. Like, that's like getting the pizza to you.
Right.
And yet, if I use this story and I go to like a bank and I say, okay, bank, let me tell you what Domino's Pizza is doing. Usually the response I get is, yes, but we're not in the food industry. Yes, we're not Domino's. You're missing the entire point of the conversation. How can you leverage the same principles of delivery at a pinpoint or delivery in the moment and apply that to your bank? It doesn't have to be in your lane. It has to be an idea that you can leverage for your business. AI. If we said stay within your lane, then every single company out there that is not a technology AI company shouldn't be using AI. But you can leverage AI for every company out there. Why? Because you can implement it in your own way to serve your customers. So if you make that comparison and bring it back internally, and you say, like you said, the meal prep or the custodians or the financial people, your financial people are only allowed to make decisions and recommendations for the financial section of the business, then that would be like saying you're not allowed to use AI because AI is only for a technology business.
Yeah. Hey, along those same lines, how important do you think it is from a business standpoint? And I'll ask you, I'm asking, part of the reason I'm asking this is one of the nonprofits that I work for, they were having a very deep conversation around mission statements because they felt that a certain event was not fitting in with the mission statement because it was a little bit outside of it was reaching into the younger community, it was reaching into the hip hop community, and they might have also been playing into some of the negatives of hip hop, meaning some of the misogyny and some of the other things that take place in that industry, and they felt that that was going against what that mission statement of the organization was. But I don't know that I necessarily agree, because I think part of the mission statement is to enhance culture and the culture across the board, including our young culture and the different other elements of that particular society that is the core audience and all along those lines. But how important do you think it is for folks to know the mission statement, and can you have different interpretations of the mission statement by different people? But do you think that that is something that the business folks should know? Because I know at one point, one of the people was saying we should have the mission statement literally wrapped around the building so everybody knows what the mission statement is. I'm thinking to myself as they were saying that might be going a little bit too far. I get your point, but that might be going a little bit too far. But what is your thoughts around the importance of knowing the mission statement of your corporation, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit organization?
Yeah, my belief is that everyone in the organization should know what the mission statement is. You should absolutely understand what the mission of the organization is. I would then also argue that if you are working there, that you agree with the mission statement. And if you don't align with the mission statement, you shouldn't work there. That's a broad statement. Like,
Right.
Go find an organization that aligns with your own values and find something that will make you happy, that will inspire you to want to achieve that mission. That's one thing. But yes, everybody in the organization should understand the mission. I would also I would also argue that there should not be different interpretations of a mission. If people don't understand, or they have different interpretations of what your mission is, rewrite your mission. Like, get it down to a point where it's very precise, and it can't be left to interpretation, because that is what your entire business is going to be based on.
No, and I hear what you're saying, but Chris, along those same lines, and I'm glad you brought that up, but there have been some folks that get upset with certain people because they feel that they have gone against their mission statement. And I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with them and everything, but last time I checked, and the primary mission of any beer company is to sell said beer. And there are some people, including some people here on this network, that were feeling that they were going outside of that particular mission when they started having causes that they were addressing and all along those lines. Because I know some people even here on this network that were not thrilled with the whole commercials around Dylan McIlvaney and all in that space. But I would argue that they were just trying to win another part of the market, given it's a small share of the market, but that share of the market they might have been trying to win. But I think that certain people on the network felt that they were alienating their core market by doing that and all in that space. So is that a danger as well? Because I know that Shaquille isn't here, but he's oftentimes on our news show, will think that there are certain corporations that are getting away from their mission because they want to address social issues and to make themselves be seen as being alert to those social issues, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's LGBTQI rights, or a number of other things. But I just wonder, do you think that that gets away from their core mission? Because I do agree with Shaquille that the core mission of a beer company is to sell as many beers as you can.
So, look, let's deep dive real quickly.
Right.
Or let's talk about Bud Light.
Yes.
And I actually write a chapter about this in my book.
Okay.
So I just looked it up real quick. The mission of Anheuser-Busch is, our dream is to bring people together for a better world. Mm-hmm. Beer is the original social network, has been bringing people together for thousands of years. I think that last part they added, I think their ultimate mission is to bring people together for a better world. Okay. Mm-hmm. So on one side, you could argue that they wanted to bring a new demographic together, which is why they created an advertising campaign, a marketing campaign, and they went forth to try to do that. Even if their mission was to sell more beer, then they're attempting to do some sort of marketing to try to sell more beer. So I actually don't think the Bud Light issue is a marketing issue. This wasn't a marketing debacle. It was partly marketing. That was the execution of it. But that is actually not the problem. The problem for Anheuser-Busch was a leadership problem. The fact that the leadership did not understand who their demographic was, and then or try to create a new product that unites the world and sells a different brand of beer in a different way, this ultimately boils back up to leadership. And also not aligned with who your core customer demographic is. So if the leadership executes something against what their core demographic is, that's the problem. And it doesn't have anything to do with the mission. It doesn't have anything to do with marketing. This is solely about recognizing that you have a wide range of customers and you are going at, we see this not just with Anheuser-Busch or Bud Light. We see this happening with a lot of organizations, which is also one of the reasons I wrote my book, was because if you have, and we'll just use simple numbers here, if you have 100 customers and 2 of your customers are asking for one thing and 98 are asking for something different, and you want to target those 2 customers, you potentially are going to lose the 98 other customers. That's what we call customer value alignment. And if you're not aligned to what your customers are asking for, and if you don't remove the bias, so you talk about misrepresentation or misinterpretation of a mission statement, you could say that you've got a leader who has no idea what's going on, and then you've got another leader who's going to, it's not a misinterpretation of the mission statement, it's a biased opinion about what they want to do with no checks and balances against what the customers want. And that's what happened. You basically had somebody who wants to execute their own biased opinion and then not have a check and balance against the customer demographic, which creates then chaos.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, one of my favorite commercials, and I'm definitely going to date myself, but it is still a commercial that resonates with a lot of people. Even to this day, even though it was created in the 70s, was definitely a commercial that did what the Anheuser-Busch mission statement says it wants to do, and that is Coca-Cola. And one of the favorite things that I remember around the Coca-Cola commercial of the 70s was this whole notion of buying the world a Coke. And that was kind of what they were doing, was this notion that we were all going to be, didn't matter our race, religion, creed, we were just all going to share that can of Coca-Cola, and that was going to be kind of the theme behind that. And that really resonated with me. I think it was one of the best commercials of all times, because you got people of different ethnicities, different cultures, but at the end, they were enjoying that refreshing taste of a cold Coca-Cola on a hot summer day, or maybe even in the house on a cool winter day. But they were definitely enjoying the taste of the Coca-Cola.
Yeah, it's a great example of a commercial that stuck with a general mission and didn't alienate their customer base.
Right.
And quite frankly, that commercial had multiple eyes on it with multiple approval processes, all the way up to the CEO, who said, yes, this meets our mission. Yes, it meets our demographic. Yes, it does what we want it to do. As opposed to just saying, go do what you want to do, or I'm too busy for that. Your too busy leadership just lost you a lot of money.
Yep, definitely lost a lot of money. What are some of the other commercials that you have seen that were very successful in that space? I definitely mentioned the Coca-Cola one, but what are some of the other ones that resonated with you even growing up, or that you thought were amazing at living with that mission statement and succeeding in what their mission statement was?
You know, the one that comes to mind actually is Wendy's. So again, a famous commercial is "Where's the beef?" And I don't know how many people who are watching or listening remember that commercial or have seen the commercial, but it revolves around how burgers were being mass produced and they were countering against McDonald's and these, small, big buns, small burgers. And an old lady comes in, looks at the burger and says, "Where's the beef?" Right. And it was a classic. Now, what's interesting about what Wendy's was doing at the time was, again, trying to differentiate who they were and what they represented in terms of quality of food against their competitors. And we've seen a lot of commercials over the years, whether it was, going back to Coke versus Pepsi, right? Or Wendy's versus McDonald's, Burger King versus McDonald's. Like, everybody wants to go against McDonald's. And, sometimes those commercials, even though they're not trying to generate some higher cause, they still are impactful because they are trying to represent what they believe they are about and what they believe their customers want from them. And I think that's ultimately always going to be the key, is how can you target your demographic with your message to attract them back to your locations.
What are you seeing as some of the trends? Because one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking is that for a long time, a lot of us were very much into the consumer notion of going to the store, whatever the store was. If you were going to KFC, you were going to KFC. If you were going to Chipotle, you were going to Chipotle's. If you were going to Ace Hardware, you were literally going to the Ace Hardware. But now we are in this era, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, where you don't have to go to the store. The store can literally come to you, and all in that space. So that seems to be one consumer change that we are seeing, because I mentioned and I joked about the drone delivery, but drone delivery is a very real thing. You just mentioned what Domino's is doing with pizza, and I have friends that drive for DoorDash and Uber, as well as a number of these other kind of services that bring the food to you. So that seems to be, as well as bring you personally to wherever you're going, because that's what Uber does. But what are you seeing as some of the trends that we need to look for from a business and consumer standpoint? Because that's one that I don't see going anywhere, because a lot of people are going to be staying in their homes doing the work. I'm not even sure what the workplace is going to look like in the sense of the physical workplace, because a lot of folks will be working from their home. So of course you want your products to come to your home as well. So that's one that I see, but I was wondering some of the other ones that you see as well.
Yeah, I think the key metric that we can look at and focus on is Christmas shopping.
Mm-hmm.
So each year, progressively, and you could even remove COVID, like just remove that out of the equation, we have seen an increase in online shopping during Christmas time and a decrease in mall shopping, going to the malls, traditional shopping, going to see Santa, getting a hot chocolate. Like, all of that is declining while all of the online shopping is increasing. Now, we could make one argument that that's all due to technology, services like Amazon, which is making it much easier to shop online and more convenient, and same day, even in some cases, next day, for products that we want. We could also argue that there is some sort of social element behind it. We are increasingly not wanting to be around people. We don't want to go try to find a parking spot in the hustle and bustle of a mall and dealing with crowds of people and going into talking with store salespeople, and like that social, physical interaction, in-person interaction is decreasing. This is also why we think AI is, becoming more powerful, because look, I no longer have to actually talk to a human being. But we also see commercials that are clearly stating like, hey, use us and you can talk to a real human being. So we haven't quite gotten out of the need for human contact, although I would argue that that need for human contact is decreasing, which is why we are finding new forms of communication, like our podcast right here. You and I are talking on a podcast. We are seeing each other. We're engaging with each other. People are listening to us. We, the two of us, would probably never have met in real life if we were just like, hey, let's go to a conference. Like those split second opportunities of meeting people. Like, this all is happening because of technology. And so there's some balance in here between our desire for human connection and our desire for technology and seamless interactions with the companies and the products and the services that we engage with. Will it all go away? Well, we can use banks as an example. The people who walk into a bank brick and mortar location to deposit a check is going down because you can do it on your phone. So I think in some industries, those store locations will decline. In other industries, like food services, I don't think, Chick-fil-A is going to go away anytime soon, because we still want to go and get our chicken nuggets. So, but that balance is something that we should actively be monitoring and be aware of, and how we navigate that over the, again, the next several years I think is going to continue to evolve.
The flip side of that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this because as you were talking, Chris, I was thinking about this, and I hear what you're saying, and definitely the malls, the traditional malls, have are starting to disappear. I know that one of our malls has totally disappeared. That being South Square here in Durham, North Carolina. The other one recently disappeared, even more recently, like in the last year or so. But what I'm seeing is that they are being replaced by bigger outlets, whether that is a bigger type mall or whether that is an experience. Because I know even in the movies, you are correct that the movies are probably declining, but then you have this rise of movies kind of to that gamification that includes your eating out and is more of an experience. So I'm wondering if the experience kind of appeal that people are wanting, which is kind of a bigger experience, even to the concert sense, because during COVID, some people realized that they didn't have to go see Taylor Swift and spend all that exorbitant amount of money or Beyonce, but they could literally get that same feel by watching the concert online and doing it while, kind of the Super Bowl experience, while eating their popcorn and pizza in their own home and all along those lines, but still enjoying the experience. But I do know that folks also like that personal experience. So you will always have folks that will want to go and enjoy the Beyonce concert or the Taylor Swift, or I can name even Alden, the popular country singer who had a controversial video that came out not that long ago, but they want to see that experience of the big show, whatever that big show is and everything. But there are those that will be willing to pay the money that is going to be the cost of that, because if less people are going, then the price is going to go up as well. But what are your thoughts about this notion of people wanting a grand experience? Because I'm even thinking about the movies that now have what we alluded to earlier, the 3D experience, and then maybe before there's a whole diner in there, and you might even have a whole 4-star restaurant meal before you actually experience the movie itself, and then you might be wearing those glasses and having the full experience kind of thing. But that seems to be what we're going for, is the big spectacular and all along those lines, even on the day-to-day experiences that folks have.
Yeah, it really boils down to a one-stop shop for everything that you want to do. So we can compare this again to Amazon. Like I can go to Amazon and I can get things for my car, things for my house, groceries, a book to read, like my book, if you want to go to Amazon and buy it. So you can go to one stop and get really everything that you need. These experiences, and they're very popular out here in California where I'm at. There's 2 locations that are a prime example. It is all one-stop shop. You can go watch a movie, go get dinner, go shopping for your clothes, go shopping for groceries. There's a Target in the shopping center. And then there's also apartment complexes wrapped around that. So if you can imagine, like you could go rent an apartment and then just walk outside and you've got a full spectrum of various activities that you can partake in. You don't have to go anywhere. It's all in that one-stop spot, right? So I think convenience and feasibility, right? When we get more into the Midwest of the United States, things are so spread out, and you may want to go see a movie, but then you have to drive somewhere else to go get dinner, and then you want to get your car serviced, and you've got to go again another 5 miles down the street to do that. I think these big entertainment experiences, as you said, are focused primarily on targeting ease, convenience, and simplifying the a location for you to experience it all.
Yeah, and it's not just there, but even the city planners, because I have friends that are in that lane, and we've been doing some efforts around what the downtown Durham will look like in the near future, as well as what it has looked like in the past. As a matter of fact, one of the exhibits currently at Hayti is what the students were envisioning 2100 would look like. And these are not any involved in city planning whatsoever, because they're school kids, but their visions was very much what you just described. It was kind of like that everything would be more centralized. And if they wanted to go to a concert or go to a restaurant or a number of other things, it would always be nearby. And there is some of that is taking place even currently here in Durham, because the DPAC and the ballpark aren't that far from the downtown area. So that is partially even how they sell the apartment complexes that they are building more and more of them, including more and more in the downtown area, but it is what you just said, that footprint notion. Because I know a lot of times people in city planning will talk about the footprint, and it's how you are attached to whatever you're trying to be close to. So if you want to have a footprint that would include a laundromat, if you're going to have to do outside washing of your clothes as opposed to having a washing machine in your house or anything. And of course, having convenience to the grocery stores and having convenience to the entertainment and sports that you want to see, and a number of other things that I hear city planners oftentimes talking about, and not just city planners, but even country and county planners might wanting to make sure that everything is nearby. And if there have been corporations that have used that as part of their model, because I know that one of the things I'd love to hear your thoughts about this that is praised in this area is I think it's both Red Hat as well as Cisco, and there might be some other ones. Oh, SAS. The SAS is definitely one that are known for including things that are part of the family structure. So all three of those companies, I think, as I recall, are known for having like some daycare options in the corporate building, and of course, they're known for having some fitness kind of things, including some off the hours or during hour kind of exercises. So maybe they're doing some mindfulness exercises or some yoga or some other things, but they are all trying to make the corporation part of the greater family landscape, because I know that more and more women are working. So those three companies, and I think other companies, have made it a point to have daycare available, to have schooling available, to have other things available. So is that a trend that you are seeing as a student of business, that we're seeing more of this, where companies themselves are trying to make sure that they are not having to lose their employees to the employees going home and not having those perks available if they are working in the office? And I do know, as I mentioned earlier, that a lot of people are working from their home, but if they're working from the office, making sure that those perks are available.
Yeah, I think in general, we're seeing the average company increase their perks, definitely when it comes to family and opportunities to support well-being.
Right.
Some of the larger organizations like Google, as an example, Facebook, you're actually seeing a decrease in some of their perks because they felt that they kind of went overboard in the time of, say 5 years ago. And now after COVID, and as people are no longer coming into the office, and we're trying to gauge how do we get people back into the office and how do we, provide perks for them to get back. But, we don't need all these perks because not everybody is in the office anymore. So there's kind of this coming together in terms of, smaller organizations are increasing perks and larger organizations are decreasing perks. But I think still the focus is on general well-being and work-life balance, and how can we help you be happier in your roles.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. You mentioned Google. I know that you had worked for Google. You also worked for a couple of other amazing companies that folks would consider their dream jobs. Because I know some folks would be like, wait a minute, he works for Fox, he works for Disney, he works for Universal and Electronic Arts. And we mentioned the video game space and all of that. But in all of that work that you have done and everything, what is a common thread that you have seen that you think is the common thread between all of those mega companies? And like I said, some people will recognize the leaders of some of those, and some of those they won't even remember who is currently in the head of Universal, myself included. And I think I remember vaguely who is the head of Disney, and I can definitely Google up Fox and Electronic Arts, and of course the Google head is oftentimes in the news and everything. But what is some of the lessons you yourself personally learned from all these amazing leaders that you have worked with and for and everything in that space?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in a broad sense, I have tried to maintain my own passions in the work that I do and bring relevancy to whatever the role is. So in my career, I have often been in a position to help the business and the technology sides bridge a gap. The communication of how do we bring business and technology together to serve customers is the critical point, all the way to the fact that I've written a book on the concept of understanding what customers are expecting, and understand that customers' needs and aspirations evolve. And as a result, the businesses, the organizations, and it doesn't matter if you're a small business or a large business like Google, you have to be able to adjust to continuously understand and meet consumer needs. And we've talked about this throughout the episode. It's your needs for groceries, your need to be entertained, the experience that you're looking for, the convenience, the ability to order something next day, delivery, drone delivery in cases like these are all needs and aspirations that are evolving. And I've been fortunate enough to be in organizations and work for companies that want to try to achieve that success when it comes back to their customers. So, what I've taken away in pretty much every business and every company that I've worked for is a further commitment, is a further realization that you have to focus on your customers. And if you don't, that those customers, just like in the Bud Light example, are ultimately going to go off and find another business that can deliver and meet their needs.
Speaking of meeting needs, there's a couple of questions I had to ask you, and then we'll get ready to wrap up in a few minutes and all along those lines. But one of those customers' needs that people oftentimes talk about is one of those companies that you work for and or have worked for in the past. But do you think that on the opposite side of what happened with the Budweiser is what is happening with Disney? Because I personally think that Disney made a mistake by focusing a little bit too much on some of what was going on in that battle with DeSantis. Well, actually, I think DeSantis made the mistake, not necessarily Disney. But I was just wondering your take on that, because I think that there's a whole conversation around whether Disney was being quote unquote too woke or not, as I think a misdirected conversation and all along those lines. But I don't know if you had any thought as one that works for Disney. I would imagine it was more Disneyland than Disney World, because they are two separate ones and you're in California.
Yeah, so I'm a big Disney fan, or at least in general, I should say I'm a Walt Disney fan.
Right.
And unfortunately, right now, Disney is destroying itself, absolutely destroying itself more than even Bud Light has done. And maybe it's partly because of wokeism, or maybe it's a part because of politics. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but they are consistently making bad decision after bad decision, and they are running the company into the ground. And it is no longer what we would say, no longer the Disney I knew. Like, the difference between Walt Disney's Disney company and Bob Iger's Disney company today is a drastic shift. And unfortunately, no different than what we are talking about, they are catering to a very small minority, and they are ignoring 98%, 95%, if we want to be reasonable, of their actual demographic and fan base. And you see it across the entire organization, not just in movies, not just in entertainment, but in the theme parks, in decisions that they are making, in business decisions, all of it. They are basically systematically removing Walt Disney and the original ideas and inspiration and concepts that he had developed to support and maintain the legacy of this company. And it, honestly, it is not just from a business point of view. It's sad to see, but personally, it's just awful to watch this company basically being dismantled.
Well, what is it about Disney, the gentleman, that you admired? Because, like I said, I've definitely read about Disney, and I've definitely seen some things that were very admirable about Mr. Walt Disney and all along those lines, including creating Disney in the middle of nowhere and all in that space. But what are some of the things that you particularly admired about Mr. Disney? And then I might get to some of your other folks that are your role models as well. But what is it about Disney that struck a chord with you, whether that was a chord that you were struck as a kid, or whether that was a chord that you got struck when you started discussing and learning about business?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was going to Disney and Disney World when I was a kid. Ever since I was 3 years old, 4 years old, I remember traveling with the family to Disney World and seeing my grandparents and going through the parks and when Epcot was built and like that has been a part of my life for a long time. But then obviously as I got older and I got into business and I started to better understand Walt Disney as the individual, as the man and the creativity, the inspiration behind all of this, the fantasy, the innovation in a lot of areas. Like when we think of, we talk about AI and how AI has been around since the 50s. Walt Disney had partaken in theoretical conversations around leveraging AI in some of the attractions. We look at animatronics for rides like the Haunted Mansion or the Pirates ride. Like that technology has revolutionized what we know today in terms of robotics. Um, Animation, the art of animation and where that grew from has roots in his visions. And then of course Disneyland when he built it, this idea of developing a theme park for families, like again, revolutionary. And so I think if you break down some of his ideas and goals and inspirations and look through his life and his quotes, they're not all perfect by any means. I get that. But from a business perspective, he is definitely somebody to model what you want to try to accomplish in your business.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was actually thinking about, and I've not been to Disney World that many times. I think maybe 2 or 3 times in my life and everything. But one of the times was actually when I learned about what you were just talking about with his innovation, even in the 70s. But it was also a very sad occasion because it was the day that Elvis died, in that fateful day in the 70s. I don't remember the exact year off the top of my head, but I remember going with my grandmother, who has since passed on, actually a few years after we went on to this particular family trip, me and my younger brother and Grandma Molly, my grandma on my dad's side. But I remember some of those fancy rides, which seem mild by today's standards, but I remember them, like, literally stopping and going upside down, and Grandma Molly looking at me and my brother, who I think was trying to instigate her into getting on the ride, and going like, "You can forget it. I am not getting on that ride. You can't pay me to get on that ride because it is literally suspended in midair. If y'all want to go for it, knock yourselves out. But I am not doing it. No way, no how, no kind of way that is going to happen in this particular lifetime." And no, she never got on that ride. And like I said, when we got back to the hotel room, that's when I turned on the TV, or somebody turned on the TV. She might have turned on the TV. And that's when we realized that Elvis had passed on that particular summer, because it was a summer and it was a summer vacation. But I do have memories of that particular thing. And I also have memories of Grandma Molly going like, "No." And like I said, it's mild compared to what she might have had to face today and everything. But that was something she was not having whatsoever in any sense of the word.
Yeah.
Uh, Along those same lines, I mentioned those kind of like people that you admire, idols. Some people might consider them, and all in that space. But who are some of the folks that you admire in your own business journey and all along those lines? You definitely mentioned Disney, but who are some of the other folks that are your role models, and what about them makes them your role models? It might have even been some of your past leaders that you have worked under, or it might have been even folks in your own family. And then I had to have a question about customers and a mantra that exists within the customer lane that I want to see if you think that is a correct mantra, and I'll get to that in a second. But who are some of the role models that you really admire greatly?
Yeah. I have a lot of role models, I think, over the course of the years, working with a lot of incredible people, all the way back to one of my first jobs. My manager at that time was a great inspiration and set me on a fabulous path for what I even still do today. And then, of course, I've had managers recently that have been spectacular. And I think the common consistency in all of those leaders that I really admire are the amount of time that and the interest that they took in my well-being, in my success, in what I wanted and aspired to accomplish while I was at that particular job. It was never about them. It was never about what they wanted to accomplish. And I'm sure, again, a lot of the listeners, people who are watching, have probably been in similar situations where you have a manager, a boss. They take all of your ideas, they claim the ideas as their own, they take credit for all of the work that you've done. They never highlight what you have accomplished for them on their behalf or for the organization. Like those types of leaders who are selfish and are only in it for their own personal well-being. And I've had a lot of them as well. You could still learn something from those individuals, as more along the lines as to what not to do, but you could take that and understand what is your own personal motivation, what is driving you to get up and go to work every day. And if you don't have somebody who is there to see you be successful, then I would argue it's probably time to start looking for another job.
Along those same lines, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, but even in the business lane, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there, both that listen to this show and listen to a number of our other shows as well. There are a lot of people that are not as encouraging of your dreams, and they try to meld your dream into their dream. And I'm not saying you can't be supportive of other people's dreams, but I have seen a lot of folks that will hijack your dream and try to make it relevant to what they are trying to create, and not necessarily use it for their the betterment of the overall dream and everything. But I was wondering if that's something that you have faced, and if that's something that you think that a lot of business people deal with. Because I know that even in my own life, I have had people that have literally wanted you to fall underneath them, or to kind of like fall underneath their umbrella, and sometimes they don't even hear what your own vision is, because that night what they want to do might not even be what you have on your agenda list and everything. But I think that it is more common than we like to think it is. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, as you have talked to many a business person and many a person that has worked in these various corporations. Because I sometimes think, to your point, that there are folks that literally will steal the idea, or there are folks that will also try to co-opt your dream and not necessarily into what they are trying to create, not necessarily hearing what your vision is.
Yeah, I think this goes partly back to our conversation on mission statements. Like,
Right.
find a company that aligns with your own personal mission and your own personal passion, and go work for the company that is already aligned with you. Then, in theory, everybody else is also aligned with what your own personal passions and missions are. But I'll flip this around a little bit, and let's just say I have a mission for something specific, and I go into an organization and I want to reveal my mission. As a good leader, I can maintain whatever that personal passion mission is that I have, and bring people along with me, and still care about what your personal well-being is and how your personal success is. And your personal mission may not be the same as mine. That doesn't mean I discount that. It doesn't mean I say, well, you either get on board with me or you don't. But let's just say that I have a leader who then takes my mission and wants to make it their own. I would argue that's a good thing, because now I got somebody else to promote what I'm trying to do, and is aligned with what I want. Now, again, there's a fine balance between bringing that leader on for the journey versus that leader basically taking your ideas and throwing you under the bus and not giving you credit for it, and discounting everything that you've done. Those toxic individuals, and they're out there, they're all over the place. Those are the ones you want to avoid. Those are the ones that you're like, well, this isn't going to work out, I'm going to leave or move on.
But Chris, you say to avoid them, but one of the things that I have heard, and I'd love to hear your comments about this, and I'm going to actually go to the entrepreneurial side as opposed to the more traditional businesses that have employees and all along those lines. Because in the entrepreneurial space, there are solopreneurs and there are different kinds of entrepreneurs, and there are some people that will make the argument that that if they are dealing with a snake in the woods, that they would rather deal with the snake that they know versus the snake that they don't know, because at least the snake that they know how far to keep the rod and the distance from them, and all along those lines. Because I've heard that put out there in various conversations that some people will be like, yeah, I know that that person is a snake, and I know that they are not good for my benefit or everything else, but I need them for whatever reason the person may feel that they need them. But since I know he's a snake, I will, or she, I will keep the rod at a distance so that I don't get bit and that I can put them off and everything. And I've heard that from a number of entrepreneurial types.
Sure. Absolutely. You could argue, like, I know they're a snake, so I'm going to keep them at a distance, like keep your enemies close, right? Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer type of thing. Sure. You could argue that. But
Yeah.
I think what you touched on is I keep them around for a purpose. That's the wrong attitude.
Right.
My belief is like, if you've got to deal with a snake and you have no other choice, then great. Understand that they're a snake and deal with it. But don't do it just because you feel as an entrepreneur you have to keep them around. Like, this would be, for example, I need to build a website, so I'm going to hire a website company to build my website. I know they suck, but I'm going to keep them because I have to build a website. No, you don't. Go find somebody else to build your website that is not a snake, who is going to align with your values and your interests and your belief, and is going to have your best interest at heart. Like, the moment you say, I'm just going to keep them around because I have to, you're using them. You're really doing nothing different than they're doing to you. You're just as toxic in that scenario. You're an entrepreneur. Go find people who align with you. You have the luxury to do that. Anybody who says they don't have the luxury and they have to use this person because they have to use them, then you're just not in a right position. You've got to go out and find people who are going to be passionate with you, who are going to support you, who are going to thrive in the same environment as you, and not at the sake of your company.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You know, that was the thing, and that's what I was going to allude to it earlier. There is this notion, it's been out there ever since probably the 50s, before I was born, because I was born actually in the year that you mentioned about the Jetsons in 62 and all in that space. But definitely, that being said, there is a notion. One thing I heard about it in a couple of Happy Days episodes, so that would put it out there in the 50s, if not before, because I might have even heard it during an episode of The Waltons, and that was set during the Great Depression. But there's this notion that has been out there probably since the beginning of America, if not the beginning of time, that the customer is always right. Is that a true assessment, or are there times that the customer is wrong? Because that is something that any business will tell you is the reason that they will get their employees not to push back if the employee says something and is complaining, and oftentimes the complaints are rightful, but there is this trope or this notion that the customer is always right. Is that a fair assessment, or are there times that the customer is wrong?
Yeah, so crazy enough, I wrote this in the introduction to my book, so you can go get a copy, and I actually touch on this. One of my first jobs I mentioned was working at a movie theater, and I was taught in my first job when I was 17 years old, the customer is always right. And I believed that. At the time, I fully believed that the customer is always right. I think today, I believe that there's slightly more nuances in that statement. Are they always right? No. Are they hard to deal with at times? Yes. Are customers complicated? Absolutely. But there's still an element of the customer is always right. And here's what I mean by that. They may be unrealistic in their expectations, but they're still your customer. They're still giving you money. And it's as simple as this. If you do not have customers, you do not have a business.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to appease the customer on some level. You have to meet the customer's needs, aspirations, expectations. You have to be able to deliver those. And they can still be wrong. They can still be rude. They can still be unrealistic. But you still have to understand at a broad sense, who are your customers? What do they want? And be able to deliver something to them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You definitely have to be able to deliver something to them on that sense and everything. One of the things that the network oftentimes talks about, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this as well, is this notion of fiscal literacy and the importance of fiscal literacy. Because I do know that both of the founders, Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun, are of the opinion, and I agree with them, that we don't teach enough about fiscal literacy and even how to balance our budgets and a number of other things. And that is a failure in our school system. But I was wondering your thoughts around that, and is that something that the book touches on as well? Because I know, like I said, that both Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun, who are founders of this network, have oftentimes talked about that particular failure that they feel from our education standpoint, that we're not doing enough to teach people the very basics around fiscal literacy, and that there are many people that don't have $400 to get by on the basic necessities, and there are many people that couldn't balance a budget if you threaten them with their life in order to do it, and all in that space. But what is your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I believe that in our education system, there's a lot of things that we should be teaching: fiscal, financial literacy, balancing checkbooks, checking, savings, stock market, like all of those things we should be teaching as early as possible, as well as, heck, when I was in junior high, when I was in fifth grade, I think I had to take home economics. I had to learn how to cook and sew. Like, I actually took sewing in one of my classes. Like, I don't believe there's a school in the entire country that teaches home economics anymore. I could be wrong. I would love to hear about it if there are. But things like our everyday life, dealing with everyday life scenarios. I need to go to the grocery store and buy something. How do I balance a checkbook, even though we don't have checkbooks anymore? Um, Financial responsibility, savings. What is savings? How do we save? Investing, like, even teach that. Everything from home and, beyond the sciences and the literature, which we also all need. What is good? Heck, as well as I do. I have three children, and my son is now a junior in high school, and he comes home with his algebra and calculus. And the first thing out of my mouth is, once you get out of high school, you're never going to have to remember any of that, right? I mean, we say that all the time. So I think some of this is about, teaching stuff that is going to be ongoing and continuous, and is going to allow us to learn core skills that we can maintain as we continue to grow. Heck, teach somebody how to create a shopping list. Even though, again, today we can leverage AI to create a shopping list, as well as use our home assistants to keep track of that shopping list, and then send that shopping list to, even like Amazon, and have it delivered and shipped to us via drones. I think some of those skills we're still going to need, and are important for us. And I believe we lost our host. Gotta love technology. Well, we will give him another couple of minutes to try to get back. And if not, then I will have to sign off. I wonder who's watching live. Anybody watching live? We don't have any questions. It does say live. Maybe on YouTube? Anybody on YouTube watching live? We'll give it one more minute and see if he comes back. I'm trying to think of anything else I can share with you. I'll share a little bit about my book in just a moment. or it could be thunderstorm has s- shocked out the power and he won't be back. Again, good times, huh? Okay, I'll tell you what, I will wrap it up for this show and share a little bit more about myself and how you can get in touch with me and about my book. So, again, my name is Chris Hood. It's in the bottom of the screen. You can reach me at chrishood.com. That is my website for really everything. You can find my blog. You can find all my social media accounts. My podcast is The Chris Hood Digital Show, where I talk with guests on a regular basis about digital challenges that we are all faced with personally and professionally. And I just wrote a book, and that book is called Customer Transformation. It's all about how to navigate the digital era and align with your customers to generate business value. And this is a book that is for anybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or you are a CEO at a large organization. Customer transformation is all about understanding who your customer is and then how to align your entire organization to have a customer centric or a customer first viewpoint. And that is across marketing and product management and sales and technology. So, customer transformation, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or you can find it on my website at chrishood.com. And thank you for the time today. Thank you for watching. And if you're still watching live, I'm sorry for whatever the technical issue has become. But I look forward to chatting with you. Reach out to me anytime and glad to be here. And thank you again for watching. Okay. And with that, we'll call it. Thanks, everyone.
All right, folks, you gotta love technology. I appreciate that great conversation with Chris Hood. Did not get a chance to ask him the usual question that I ask of all the guests, which is how he can be reached and any message of positivity and hope that he would like to leave with the audience and all in that space. But definitely a great conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed the chance to talk to Mr. Hood and to learn about his book, his philosophies, and a number of other things in that regard. So, like I said, a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing him come back in the not too distant future and share more of his thoughts about what's going on in his life and with what he's got going on in his world and all in that space. So definitely, like I said, he was a great guest. Hope that he'll make a return trip in the not too distant future and all along those lines. I'm actually getting ready to get out and go to that place that I was mentioning to him, the Haiti Heritage Center, and all in that space. I think we've got African dance for women today, and we'll see what's going on in that world and what's happening in that kind of lane and all in that kind of space. But definitely a great conversation. I hope he enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it with him. And like I said, hopefully he'll make a return trip in the not too distant future. He is a fellow podcaster, so I'm sure that he is aware that sometimes the things don't go the way that we want them to in terms of the closing and all in that space. So definitely, like I said, I might run a couple of commercials and I might reach out to him via email and see if he's able to come back and close out our conversation. But if not, I'll totally understand, as we had a great conversation and some great conversation about a number of very important things that were going on and all along those lines. So right now I'm going to play Sisters announcement video because they've got that event coming up in Virginia very shortly. So I'm going to play that and maybe one or two other videos and see if Chris can pop in. Otherwise, we're going to call it a day with another edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. Hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed providing it to you.
Calling all women in the C-suites. I'm talking to you. Yes, you. Powerful women who constantly pour out to others. It's time to pour into yourselves and accelerate possibilities. Come along to the Sisters Inspire Sisters to Advance 2023 conference being held October 13th through the 15th, 2023 at the Holiday Inn and Suites, Ocean City, Maryland. With this year's theme, The Power of Sisterhood, you are guaranteed to have a phenomenal time. Engage with other fellow powerhouses in training and camaraderie. Inspire future women CEOs to elevate, open doors, and earn the respect and love that they deserve. Empower women to connect, learn, grow, and thrive in a safe and supportive environment, embracing their strengths while creating global impact. Meet your conference sisters, Pamela D. Marshall, Lois Barth, Lisa Santiago McNeil, Dr. Obiama Martin, B. Michelle Pippin, Barbara H. Smith. So come on and let your hair down. Be energized and reignited. Welcome to a world where all women are supported, valued, connected, and empowered to reach their full potential and foster a just and equitable society. Do you want a taste of what you might have missed last year? Well, here's what went down last year at that conference. Take a look.
He is positioning us for greater. So we have an assignment that we have to fulfill. We have steps.
First real death. I didn't know how to handle that. Who taught me what to do? So I was crying and I was upset. I was crying.
So it doesn't matter. I know who I am.
Do Terry know who she is?
And he is trying to give you enough for you and you and you and you to give to her and her and her and him. Don't miss your chance to come this year. So secure your ticket now. Sisters Inspire Sisters to Advance 2023 conference is a must-attend conference of the decade. We are empowering women to empower the world. Register today.
Another commercial coming.
I love to introduce somebody really awesome. He is a master of training other speaker, and he is a great speaker because I saw him speaking, and he hardcore. He looks like athlete. He looks like a fighter. But when he starts speaking, he speaks with a real warm heart and really touch people's heart and really fascinate people.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them or disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the one thing you cannot do is ignore them. Because they change things, they push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do.
Reuben West communicates by connecting with his audience when he presents and when he's sharing a key message. Being able to connect and communicate your instructions clearly is a masterful skill.
The ultimate professional. Reuben is a guy that not only teaches a message, but also demonstrates the message. He's helped me to craft my art, and I'm sure he'll help you to craft yours.
Very accomplished international speaker, being able to just connect to any audience, no matter where they come from or what kind of people they are. He helps you and serves you in every kind of way to elevate you as a speaker, and I highly recommend him.
He is a people's heart connecting scientist with a using instrument of your voice and your appearance and your heart to touch people's heart.
His communication is unmatched. I'm Australian, he's American, and it really makes no difference as to our culture and where we have come from, because his message, the way he communicates it, is from humanity.
Find a way to take the next step. Thank you.
It is a gem, tucked away near a forest, a place where the lost are found. It is a gift of wholeness for those who are ready to receive it. A secret place where peace can be found in stillness, where you can finally stop fighting to survive and just breathe. Just breathe. Where accountability corrects and the word help is not a cuss word. It is the place that was thought of before you ever thought you needed it. It is where forgiveness starts and healing begins. Well, we are taught that when we put our hands to work, we can create something. As we uprooted the weeds in the garden, it was a reflection of our lives. As we uprooted disappointment, as we uprooted pain, as we uprooted being traumatized. Because God doesn't deal with the surface. He gets to the root of it. We laughed. We shared tears. We shared our stories. We shared our fears, our dreams, our visions, our heart. We were more than just mothers. We were broken women trying to figure out how to become whole again. It became a place where homelessness became hopeless until we reached the bridge of wholeness.
I'd like you to imagine with me, if you will, opening an app where you can collaborate with like-minded individuals from around the world, get inspiration and in-app tools to launch and grow your business, as well as share your knowledge and earn compensation, all in one app. Well, the name of that app is Truso, short for Truly Social. Hi, I'm Matthew Newman, the founder and CEO of Truso. A new concept in social media, Truso is designed from the ground up to be a platform that's both social and empowering for all its users. How exactly do we do that? I'm glad you asked. First, Truso brings the world together via video. Psychologists assert that video provides a significantly more effective connection than audio only. When you enter a community on Truso, you're face to face. Second, on Truso, you don't have to have 1 million followers to monetize. Our business model allows all hosts and moderators to monetize, no matter the size of your following, by 1, producing fee-based content, and 2, inviting others to join the platform as subscribers. Even more, Truso has an in-app resource library with over 100 free resources, forms, and documents to help you build your brand and grow your business. Third, Truso is inclusive. The deaf and hard of hearing communities make up 360 million people worldwide. Unlike audio-only apps, Truso embraces this community, providing a networking platform that allows them to participate via video and closed captioning. We even have a deaf and hard of hearing foundation in the works as well. Fourth, Truso is both social and safe. We refer to Truso as a virtual extension of the beauty shop, barbershop, and brainchild of the community. A place where there's laughter, along with wisdom, growth-oriented conversation, and genuine connections in a safe space. Truso even has proprietary security to ensure we maintain a safe environment for everyone. Where are we at now? Truso is live, y'all. We've launched in beta, and we're acquiring users daily. We have an incredible development and marketing team, plus amazing celebrity influencers at the table, helping us spread the word around the globe, beginning within the African diaspora and beyond by creating a safe space for growth, connection, and collaboration. We're truly excited about Truso. We've created something special for which there is a global market. And we invite you to embark on this journey with us as a shareholder. The future for Truso is truly bright. Join us and let's go there together.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Couliet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252-1692.
That was 1692, in case you didn't catch it or anything along those lines and everything. But this is getting ready to wrap up this edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. Hope everybody enjoyed it, including that conversation that we had with Chris Hood. Like I said, I was giving him an opportunity in case he wanted to come back in or had the opportunity to come back in, because it was definitely on my end that we were having those technical difficulties and all along those lines. But I think we learned quite a bit from Chris Hood and all along those lines, and I hope that you are definitely able to see him come back on some future shows as well. But he definitely does talk about the consumer transformation. That is the name of his book, and all along those lines. And as he said, you can find that book on Amazon and a number of other places as well. So I do know that Shaquille has bought a few of these books from our guests, and I have definitely got some, even though not nearly as many as Shaquille has gotten from the various guests that we've had. And I've actually got to do better in that regards and all along those lines. But definitely, if you want to, you can also go to his website, which is chrishood.com. And there you can hear about the book, which is Customer Transformation. And it is quite a fascinating book, and definitely one that I think will resonate with a lot of folks that are watching and learning about their customer identity and all in that space. So like I said, we're going to wrap up with that same intro that we began the show with, is how we end the show as well. So get ready to end it right now, but definitely looking forward to having Chris back on a future edition. And maybe on that future edition, we can get his message of hope and thoughts around ways that we can make this a better world, since that is usually something that I get all my guests to do, but he did not have that opportunity on this particular time and all along those lines. But it was still a fantastic interview, and I look forward to him making a return trip in the not too distant future. But right now, we're getting ready to get on out of here. Hope that y'all have a good afternoon and a pleasant Monday ahead, and have a very productive week ahead as well. But we've got other shows, including Maxine. That's right, Maxine Phillips will be coming our way with a very special guest on later on this afternoon at 7 o'clock. So that'll be coming your way, in addition to some other shows that'll be coming here on a Monday evening as well. But right now, we're heading on out.